My student Lewis has been crushing it lately. Recently, he had an incredible day at 10NL on GG Poker, where he played 6,000 hands and he won $175. That's 27 big blinds per 100 hands. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the hands that he played in that session to see if he really played well or if he just got lucky. And I can tell you, I have come across a mistake that most of you make. It is a very subtle one, but it can be very costly. So make sure to watch the video until the end, where I will reveal how you can avoid this mistake. We will, however, start with a thing my student does very well. And again, I think that most of you won't do this. So let's get right into the analysis. So Lewis raises pocket jacks under the gun, gets called by the button and by the big blind. Flop is 4-3-3. I'm totally on board with a check because we're monkey in the middle, and even though we have an overpair, we have to tread carefully. Now the villain on the button makes it 6 big blinds. The other villain calls, and I think we have a mandatory call. They could be doing this with all sorts of things, so happy to see the call, and even happier to see the jack on the turn. The first villain checks again. We obviously check to the aggressor, and he now unfortunately checks behind. But on the river, we lose to 5-6 now, and we have the big blind who bets quarter pot. So that doesn't sound like he has a hand like 5-6 or a set of fours or something like that. So we can definitely go for a value raise. The question is how big, and Lewis just jammed, which at first I thought, wow, this is a very big one, but actually I think it is really good because it puts pressure on someone with a 3, but I still think that they can't fold the 3, and the button folds, and we do indeed get looked up by the ace-3 of hearts. So very well done. We won a really big pot to start with here. In this next hand, Lewis does the same thing pretty much, and it's really good. So here he has pocket queens. There is a raise, a call, and we make it 16 in the big blind with pocket queens. Absolutely fine with that. We get called by the original raiser. 7-7-6. We're not afraid of anything really. We just go for the c-bet. Half pot is really nice. And on this 10 turn, would you chicken out? Well, Lewis certainly didn't, and he did the right thing. And Lewis just jammed, and I think that's exactly the right thing to do. It's almost a pot-sized bet, and we can get called by jacks, by 9s, 8s, of course also by a 7 or pocket 10s, but we would go broke anyway, so really happy with this one. He gets it in, and he gets called by pocket 8s. Well done on this one for sure. There's another interesting shove in this next hand. Let's see if you would have done the same. So this time button opens to 3x. We have ace-9 suited in the small blind. We can raise, or we can even just call, which I was surprised to see. We get called, and we flop pretty well with 2 hearts. We can definitely go for a c-bet, and we get called. And now the jack on the turn brings in 2 flush draws, and now Lewis just jams once again. This is an overbet jam for a change. I'm not entirely sure if this is correct though, so that's why I checked the solver. And solver says yes, 0.1% of the time you can jam. It's definitely not a mistake because, as you can see, it's basically same EV, but the preferred option would be to bet half pot rather than the overbet. And also I think exploitatively you can't really fold out too much. I don't think a king will ever fold, and yes, maybe pocket queens if you had that, but anything else is basically 2 pair or a straight. Anyway, we get called by pocket jacks, and we lose, although we run it twice. In this next one, I don't think I could have gotten away myself. However, it does show something very important for low stakes games. So let's have a look. The small blind raises. We have ace king in the big blind, obviously an easy 3-bet. And then we get 4-bet. And yes, it is blind versus blind. However, we got 4-bet. Just keep that in mind. So I would probably still just jam this one. Lewis just jams and he gets called. And what does he get called by? We'll see that in a second. So in any case, we win it with a straight against pocket aces. So we got really, really lucky in this one. And as I said, it is one I won't be able to get away either, especially because it's blind versus blind. However, I'm not surprised at 10NL to see that he actually had aces. In this next one, we have some great play mixed with some, well, maybe questionable play. So we have pocket tens in the big blind. There is a raise from the hijack. Would you just call or raise with pocket tens? Well, according to Solver, it's actually a little mistake to raise. 7-5 deuce. We could donk, but I think it's better to just check. We face the small c-bet, and I think this is a very, very important one to check raise, which a lot of players might not find. Once we get called, what is his range? Well, definitely stuff that beats us would be over pairs, but it could also be 8s, 9s, a 7, maybe ace king, ace queen, something like that. Keep that in mind. On the turn, we would be too thin to go for another bet, so we check. And now villain bets pretty big. We have to be good 30% of the time. Solver always calls here, never folds. Folding at this point is not even super bad, but I can see calling is fine if you think that he would do this with ace king or ace queen or something like that. Anyway, we call, and on the river we definitely get bailed out with now pretty much the nuts. We have top set, but you don't want to donk now, although exploitatively maybe you could do that, but I think checking is fine. So Lewis checked, and villain now bets 30 into 49. So this is a really big bet. I think now he probably has an overpair, and obviously there's not much that we can do except for shove, which Lewis thankfully does, and he gets called by a set of deuces. Wow, so we got super, super lucky on this river. The next one is another blind versus blind. We open 5-3 suited, get called, have a pretty good flop for our hand and also for our range. Definitely going with a small c-bet in this spot, and we get raised. So at this point, I think it's fine to just call, definitely not folding, even though we're drawing to the 5-high flush. So we call, and now not only do we have a flush draw, but also an open ender. We check, and he now bets half pot. And at this point, I think you definitely have enough equity to call, because you probably have 30% equity and you need 25. So you're getting the right odds, the direct odds to just call this one. So that would be an easy one. Or if you do something else, you just jam. You definitely never fold in this spot. But Lewis went for a check raise, which I'm not sure is amazing because you can't follow through on the river really. Whatever it is, if you don't hit on the river, you can't follow through, which is why I actually prefer the check call in this spot. But if you raise, then just jam, and then you get it in, and you might get called, but you still have kind of good equity. As played, we do get lucky and river the flush, so we just jam, get called by King Queen. So another one where Lewis got super lucky. I don't think he played it poorly, but just on the river I would either check call or check jam, preferably check call actually because of the pot odds. Let's review a hand with pocket aces. There's a raise. We 3-bet the aces in the small blind, quite standard. Jack 3-3, and this is a little bit non-standard. Lewis now went for a third pot bet, and I understand because he has pocket aces, maybe exploitatively it's fine. Solver does do it for about 5% of the time, but the standard size here would be half pot to maybe even 3/4 pot. We get called, and now on the turn the 9 is not great for our range, but I still think we should go for a continuation bet now on this turn as well. We can still get called by queens that's slow played, some jack X, maybe still pocket tens, because otherwise we won't be able to get the money in unless we jam on the river, and then I don't think that that's great, because I doubt that we will get called by a lot worse. So I think it would be better to bet, but Lewis just checks in this case. It checks behind, and on this innocuous river we now jam, and that's why I was saying now you're basically 2xing it, which I think is a little bit too big, and therefore I doubt, I mean it's not impossible to get called by queens and tens, but 8s, 7s, I just don't think so, and he might have 6s, 9s, jacks, that's all in his range, and he does indeed call with pocket jacks. Moving on to the only hand where I think that Hero really misplayed it. He has ace-king under the gun, that's an easy open. Then we get cold and a small blind 3-bets. I'm very happy with this 4-bet, even though it's quite big. But look, we are a bit deeper. We are about 120 big blinds, so I think it's fine to go to 31 in this case, although I would still make it a little bit smaller because it kind of seems that you almost have ace-king in this spot the way you're playing it. But we get called, that's fine. On queen 9-6, we can go for a small c-bet. I don't mind that. That's what Lewis does and gets called. But now on this jack turn, the villain checks again, and now Lewis bets again, and he bets small. And just let's do a little bit of hand reading. What did villain 3-bet with and then call the 4-bet and then call the c-bet on the flop? So he has hands like either slow played aces or kings. He could have queens, he could have jacks, he could have 10s, he could have 9s, maybe 8s and 7s. So in this range that I've just mentioned, and maybe actually ace queen is also one that I could mention, and maybe jack 10 or queen jack. So out of all of these hands, now tell me which of these hands actually fold. And I think apart from 7s and 8s, nothing folds. And maybe ace-king if he has that. Yeah, okay, that you get the same hand to fold. But the majority of his range is comprised of pocket pairs, 2 pairs, or something like top pair. Or at least a really good draw, which still has a pair, like pocket 10s or jack 10 or something like that. And you will not get any of these hands to fold. And all you have is a gut shot. And now, really, I would be pretty much in give up mode. Instead, we bet small, we get jammed on, and now obviously we have to fold. And I think these 18 big blinds were quite unnecessary to risk on the turn. I do think this is a mistake, and it is what I keep preaching: just do your hand reading, guys. This is something where it's pretty clear that villain doesn't have any sort of hand that you can fold out. I mean, I say doesn't have any, it's not true, he has some, but the vast majority of his range will be continues in some shape or form. Do you guys like hero calls? Well, then you're in luck. You'll see a really big one in this hand. Here we go. There is a raise under the gun. We 3-bet pocket aces, get called, king jack 4. This is a small c-bet board. Lewis does just that. And now on this turn, I don't know, we are super deep. That's the problem. We are still 173 big blinds deep. So I can see why you would want to check, but I would probably still just go for value. And now there is an overbet by villain. I mean, this is really, really odd, and maybe this is why Lewis went on to make this big hero call, because it just seems a bit fishy. But at this point, we definitely have a call, nothing else to do. I wouldn't fold aces, even though he overbet. But now on this river where the jack now pairs, we check and he jams, and we have to be good 31% of the time. And I looked up the solver. Solver says it's a mistake to call, and I'm not sure if I find the call button here, but hero did, and he did well, because our villain had queen 9 for a missed gut shot, but I actually struggled to find some bluffs, I must say. So this is one, but I wouldn't have expected him necessarily to call with it pre-flop. And if I look at it, I don't really know what else he has as a bluff. Queen 10 maybe, that would be the other thing. Yes, there is not a lot of value either, because yeah, exactly king jack suited, and then maybe pocket 4s, but other than that, there is not much value either. So I can't fault hero for calling this one. And he definitely did very well, but just keep in mind, solver doesn't like it. And a 10NL, usually I would say this is more value than a bluff, even though, as I said, I struggle to find a lot of value combos, and I also struggle to find a lot of bluff combinations for this one. And now, as promised, the one mistake that Lewis made in this session, and the one mistake that I think that a lot of you are making as well. Let's go. So there is an open under the gun. We have ace queen offsuit, 3-betting this one. We flop top pair, top kicker. The 2 5s on the board don't scare us. So we c-bet and we get called. Turn is a 10. We can go for value. size this time is good, although you could go even slightly bigger because we are super deep, but with top pair, top kicker, I'm still totally on board to continue betting. And now on this blank river, Lewis went for about a half pot bet, even a little bit bigger than that. And I do think that this is a mistake. And why do I think so? Because of the early position configuration. Now look at this. This is low jack versus high jack. It's not cutoff versus button. It's not big blind versus small blind or versus button. And this means that a hand like top pair, top kicker in this spot, especially when we're so deep, is not a value bet. Now, there are some players where you can value bet against, especially in live poker, where you just think that they will call you down with pocket nines in this one. But against a reg, I would never do this because of the early position configuration. Now, there are not so many hands that he should have called with pre-flop already. And then remember, he called 2 barrels on the flop and on the turn. So you've really narrowed down his range. And at this point, yes, maybe pocket jacks might still call, but I think that's pretty much it. And if he's a reg, he will have slow played something, or he will turn something into a bluff now. So if he's a good player and he has pocket nines, at this point he might even turn them into a bluff, and then you have to fold. And this is exactly what's happening. He gets check raised on this river, and now he has to fold because he just doesn't want to bluff catch. Because apart from pocket nines or pocket eights or something like that, which not many players actually find to bluff with them in this spot, there are no bluffs left really, and therefore you have to fold. So the fold is good, but I would just have checked behind on the river because of the early position configuration. In general, I think that Lewis played well, even though he got lucky in some spots, and I think he's ready to move up. But if you want to see some mistakes that a lot of players make and how to avoid them, then click on the video here.